The research ship floated quietly through space among the broken pieces of what used to be a living world. Dr. Matthew Burke stood in front of the glowing screen and moved his fingers across the ancient symbols that had been dead for thousands of years. The Galactic Council had sent their smartest people to figure out what these ruins meant, but after 3 long years they had found almost nothing that made sense. Matthew was not like the others who worked on the ship. The alien scientists used their fancy computers and powerful programs to break down the language, but Matthew brought something they thought was old-fashioned. He brought gut feeling and experience from studying Earth languages that nobody could read anymore. Commander Lisa Grant walked into the room where Matthew worked, and her face showed she had bad news. The council is pulling all the money next month because they think this language is too broken to ever understand. The computers say the patterns do not match anything we know. Matthew kept looking at his work and did not turn around. That is because they are looking in the wrong places. Languages are not just computer code. They grow and change, and yes, they die too. But death does not mean we cannot bring them back. He opened his personal files and showed her pictures of strange writing from ancient Earth. There was Linear A from old Cretan symbols, from the Indus Valley, and mysterious tablets from Easter Island. On Earth, we had dozens of writing systems we could not read. We figured out some, and some are still mysteries, but I learned something important from all of them. Dead languages leave echoes behind. Lisa moved closer and felt interested even though she had her doubts. What kind of echoes do you mean? Borrowed words in the languages of their neighbors, references in their art and buildings. The way trade routes changed how people talked. The Valkyrie did not live alone in space. They had contact with at least 7 other species before they disappeared. Those species borrowed from them just like English borrowed from Latin or Japanese borrowed from Chinese. For the next week, Matthew worked so hard that his friends got worried about him. He compared every piece of Valkyrie writing with the language databases of all the civilizations that lived near them. The patterns he found were tiny, and the artificial intelligence systems had thrown them away as meaningless noise. But Matthew saw a prefix that kept showing up in Old Talnoon, trade papers, and a grammar structure that appeared in ancient Sephirim poems and verb patterns that seemed to influence how the Krell military talked in the old days. The big discovery happened at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. Matthew had been awake for 36 hours straight, and his room walls were covered in notes he wrote by hand, which the digital aliens thought was completely bizarre. His eyes were red and his coffee had gone cold hours ago, but his hands shook with excitement as he turned on his communicator. Lisa, you need to get everyone to the main lab right now. I think I figured it out. The team of researchers watched with doubt in their eyes as Matthew showed them what he found. The Thalnoon representative was a creature named Kixthor, who had 6 eye stalks and his skin rippled with colors that meant he did not believe any of this. You say you succeeded where our most advanced computers failed, and you did it with paper and pencil. Matthew smiled even though he was exhausted. I did not succeed completely. I just found the door. The Valkyrie language is not dead. It is sleeping. It evolved into pieces of at least 9 other languages. It is like how Latin never really died but became Italian and Spanish and French and Romanian. The Valkyrie people scattered when their homeworld fell and they took their language with them. It changed and adapted, but the bones are still there underneath. He turned on his presentation and showed how Valkyrie root words had changed over thousands of years. The sounds shifted, but the core meaning stayed connected. The possessive markers that seemed random were actually old Valkyrie honorifics that had evolved. The strange verb tenses that confused the computers were leftovers from a culture that saw time as a circle instead of a straight line. The room became completely silent as Matthew's reconstruction of Valkyrie grammar and vocabulary spread across all their screens. It was not complete and had many gaps and uncertainties, but it held together. It could be read and understood. Lisa stared at the translations of the first Valkyrie texts they had recovered, and her voice was soft. These are poems. They are love poems. Matthew nodded his head slowly. A civilization's last words were not instruction manuals or history books. They were poetry. They wanted someone in the future to know they loved and dreamed and hoped. And now someone does know. Kixthor's eye stalks quivered in a way that Matthew had learned meant deep emotion. How did you do this? Our machines processed more data than you can imagine. Matthew spoke quietly. Machines are very good at finding patterns in data, but humans are good at finding meaning in those patterns. We have been bringing dead languages back to life for thousands of years. It is not just about breaking codes. It is about understanding that the people who spoke these words were real. People with all the messy and illogical and beautiful complications that come with being alive. The Galactic Council did not just restore the funding, but gave them 3 times as much money as before. News about Matthew's breakthrough spread to every corner of the known galaxy. Humanity's gift for bringing back dead languages suddenly became something everyone wanted. But this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The Velkari were just one civilization, among hundreds that had gone extinct and left their words scattered across the stars. Matthew Burke had just proved that no, language stays dead forever if someone remembers how to listen to the echoes. He had shown that even after thousands of years of silence, a language could wake up again. He had given voice to people who had been silent for so long that everyone thought they would never speak again. The other species in the galaxy had always thought of humans as young and inexperienced and perhaps a bit primitive in their methods. But now they understood that sometimes the old ways had value that new technology could not replace. Sometimes intuition and empathy and the human ability to connect with the past were more powerful than any computer program. Matthew looked out at the stars and thought about all the other dead languages waiting out there in the ruins of forgotten worlds. Each one was a puzzle and a mystery and a promise. Each one represented real people who had loved and fought and dreamed just like everyone else. And now, thanks to one tired human linguist with red eyes and handwritten notes, those people would not be forgotten anymore. 6 months after Matthew figured out the Velkari language, he found himself standing in front of the Galactic Council in their huge chamber on Unity Station. Representatives from 147 different species watched him with eyes and sensors and organs he could not even name. The chamber was carved from a single asteroid and polished until it shined like a mirror, and Matthew felt very small standing there. The council overseer was a crystalline being named Sharzen, whose thoughts came out as musical tones instead of words. Dr. Burke has shown an ability to bring back extinct languages that we have never seen before. We propose creating a new institution dedicated to this work with human methods at the center of everything. The vote was not easy, and many argued against it. The Thalnoon Empire said humans were too young as a species to lead such an important project. The Cathrin Collective worried about what might happen if they dug up ancient knowledge that should stay buried. But the Velkari descendants who lived scattered across a dozen worlds spoke with passion about learning their ancestors' true words for the first time in 3,000 years. The motion passed, and everyone agreed to move forward. Within 1 year, the Academy of Lost Voices opened on the planet Arkiva, which was chosen because its orbit was stable and it was close to the area of space with the most ancient ruins. Matthew put together a team that mixed human linguists with alien specialists who each brought their own skills. One of his first recruits was Dr. Helen Wright, who specialized in Dead Earth languages and had spent 20 years trying to figure out ancient Meroitic script. "Do you really think we can teach aliens to think like human archaeologists?" Helen asked as they walked through the Academy's halls that were still being built. Construction drones buzzed over their heads, putting together the quantum computing core that would support their research. Matthew looked at the half-finished walls around them. "I think we can teach them that dead does not mean gone forever. Every species here approaches language like it is engineering with inputs and outputs and logical structures. They have never had to bring back their own extinct languages. But humans have been doing this since the Renaissance." The Academy's first class had 60 students from 32 different species. Matthew's opening lecture became famous across the galaxy because it was so different from what anyone expected. "Forget everything you know about computational linguistics. You are not here to process data like machines. You are here to become time travelers. Every dead language is a message in a bottle thrown across centuries or millennia by people who hoped someone would understand them. Your job is to be that someone." A Krill student named Thexazan raised one of his claws. "But language is fundamentally a system of encoded information. Surely the most efficient approach is systematic analysis." Matthew pulled up an image of the Rosetta Stone on the screen. This rock let humans decode Egyptian hieroglyphics after thousands of years. But you know what actually cracked it? Not just the parallel texts in 3 languages. It was a scholar named Jean-François Champollion, who spent years learning Coptic, which was the last descendant of ancient Egyptian. He understood that languages carry culture and history and worldview. He learned to think like an ancient Egyptian. He changed the display to show fragments of Linear B, which was an ancient Greek script. For decades, scholars assumed this was a completely unknown language. They were wrong. It was Greek, just written in an unexpected way. The breakthrough came when someone stopped treating it as alien and started treating it as familiar. Over the months that followed, the Academy developed a new way of working that combined human intuition and cultural analysis with alien processing power and pattern recognition. The results were amazing beyond what anyone expected. Helen's team figured out the Jilin written language in just 3 weeks by recognizing that what looked like individual characters were actually phonetic compounds, similar to Korean Hangul. A human graduate student named Carlos Mendez realized that the mysterious Calvin inscriptions were not writing at all, but musical notation that encoded speech through rhythm and pitch. But the Academy's greatest test came when the XLR Imperium arrived with an urgent request. A deep space probe had discovered a space station orbiting a dead star. The station's systems were still running after countless years, but its language was unlike anything in the galactic databases. The XLR needed to access the station's computers to prevent its decaying orbit from sending it crashing into a populated system. Matthew and a team of 12 specialists, including Helen and Carlos and Kixthor, boarded a diplomatic vessel headed for the station. The journey took 4 weeks at faster than light speeds. The station was enormous and shaped like a ring 50 kilometers across. Its hull was scarred by tiny meteorite impacts, but its interior was still pressurized and had power. The away team moved through corridors lined with writing that shifted and changed as they watched, with characters rearranging themselves like living things. "It is not one language," Helen whispered as her scanner captured every variation. "It is thousands. The script is dynamic and evolving in real time." Carlos studied the patterns carefully. "Wait and look at this. The rate of change corresponds to prime number sequences. The language is not random. It is growing according to algorithms." Matthew felt understanding click into place in his mind. It is not ancient. The language is being generated by the station's computers as they run. We are not looking at a dead language, but one that never stopped evolving. The question is, why would it do that? Kixthor's eye stalks focused on a central chamber they discovered. Inside were thousands of stasis pods lining the walls, but their contents had decayed long ago. "A generation ship?" the Thalnoon whispered. This was a colony vessel. The language was supposed to adapt as the colonists' descendants evolved over the centuries of their journey. But something went wrong. "They died before waking," Matthew said softly. But the ship's artificial intelligence kept developing the language and waiting for someone to speak to. It has been having a conversation with ghosts for millions of years. The team worked for 3 days straight using every technique they had developed. They traced the language's roots back to its original form and found similarities to 3 extinct languages in the galactic records. They mapped its evolution and understood the logic the artificial intelligence used as it created new words for concepts its dead passengers would never experience. The light of a new sun, the soil of an alien world, the joy of arriving home after a long journey. Finally, Matthew stood before the central terminal and spoke in the language's oldest form, using words the artificial intelligence had not heard in millions of years. "We hear you. We understand. You can rest now." The station's lights flickered once and then again. The script on the wall stopped its endless mutation and resolved into a simple phrase in 50 languages, both ancient and modern. "Thank you." The artificial intelligence released control of the station's systems and shut itself down peacefully with its vigil finally ended. The XLR were able to safely move the structure to a stable orbit where it would serve as a memorial. News of the mission spread through the galaxy like wildfire. The Academy of Lost Voices had done more than resurrect dead languages. They had given closure to civilizations that had vanished long before most current species had even evolved. And at the center of it all were humans teaching the galaxy that the past never truly dies if someone is willing to listen. The success of the station mission brought attention to the Academy that Matthew had never imagined possible. Requests came flooding in from every corner of the galaxy, and each one represented a civilization that had fallen silent long ago. But the message that arrived on a cold morning in the Academy's second year was different from all the others. It came with a warning and a desperate plea for help. Matthew was in his office reviewing a particularly difficult fragment of Proto-Wythlene grammar when Helen burst through the door without even knocking. "You need to see this right now." The message was from the Concordat, which was a coalition of species that controlled the galactic core. Their representative was a dignified elder named Kolvax, whose species, the Velshire, had evolved from flying creatures, and even in her advanced age, her membranous wings moved with unconscious grace as she spoke. "Dr. Burke, we require your immediate assistance with a matter of extreme sensitivity. We have discovered what we believe to be the archive of the Forerunners." The room went completely silent when she said those words. Every species in the galaxy knew about the Forerunners, who were supposedly the mythical first civilization that had mastered the stars millions of years ago. Most people considered them a legend or a story told to explain the scattered ruins and impossible artifacts found on worlds throughout the galaxy. "You are serious," Matthew said slowly. "The Forerunners were real, we believe so. The archive is located in a quarantine zone deep in the Veil Nebula. We have tried to access it with conventional methods, but the structure responds only to linguistic keys, complex phrases in a language older than any in our records. We need someone who can speak to the dead." Matthew put together his best team within hours. Helen and Carlos and Kixthor and 3 others, including a human computational linguist named Kevin Park and an insectoid Jeline named Tick-Rex. They left on a military escort ship within 48 hours. The Veil Nebula lived up to its name in every way. Clouds of ionized gas scattered their sensors, and spatial anomalies made faster than light travel impossible in the area. They spent 3 weeks carefully navigating the nebula before reaching the coordinates. The archive floated in the void like something that should not exist. It was a sphere 20 kilometers across, and its surface was covered in angular patterns that hurt to look at directly. Scanners showed it was made of materials that should not exist and arranged in structures that violated conventional physics. "No wonder they put a quarantine around this place," Carlos muttered as he stared at the readings. "Just looking at it makes my brain hurt." The entry sequence took 2 full days to figure out. The linguistic keys were not words in any normal sense, but mathematical expressions encoded in symbolic language. Kevin's expertise in formal logic, combined with Helen's understanding of how meaning shifts over time, finally cracked the sequence. The archive opened like a flower with its panels folding, back to reveal an interior that seemed larger than its exterior. The laws of physics were just suggestions here and not rules. Gravity shifted depending on which direction they looked. Time flowed at different rates in different sections of the structure. The walls were covered in script but not written on them. The language was part of the walls, as if the script and the structure were one single thing. The characters were 3-dimensional and extended into directions that human eyes were not meant to see. "This is not just a library," Helen said, and her voice trembled with awe. "It is a linguistic framework made physical. The entire structure is a written language." Kixthor's eye stalks swiveled frantically in all directions. "I am detecting over 10,000 distinct writing systems. Some appear to be languages we know, but ancient versions from millions of years ago. Others are completely alien." Matthew moved deeper into the archive, drawn by instinct toward what felt like a central chamber. The rest of the team followed him, and their recording equipment captured everything but understood nothing. The central chamber was a sphere within the larger sphere. Floating in its center was a holographic interface that activated as soon as they entered. A figure appeared that was humanoid but not human, and its features shifted through 100 different forms as they watched. When it spoke, its voice came in every language at once. It should have been chaos, but somehow it resolved into perfect clarity in each listener's mind. "You have come. The last speakers have arrived." "Last speakers?" Matthew asked. "What do you mean by that? We are the Forerunners. The first to rise and the first to fall. We built this archive as a testament and a warning. Within these walls is recorded every language that ever existed in this galaxy. 10 million years of linguistic evolution, from the first grunts of pre-sentient beings to the quantum harmonics of species who transcended physical form." The hologram gestured, and the walls came alive with text. Scripts flowed like water and merged and split and evolved before their eyes. Language is not merely communication. It is thought made external. Each language creates a unique way of perceiving reality. When a language dies, an entire way of understanding the universe dies with it. But why build this? Helen asked with wonder in her voice. Why preserve all of this? Because we made a terrible mistake. In our arrogance, we created a universal language that was perfect and logical, and designed to replace all others. We believed it would unite the galaxy and end misunderstandings and bring perfect clarity to all communication. The hologram's form shifted to something darker and more ominous. We succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Within 1,000 years, every species in the galaxy spoke our universal language. Their native tongues were forgotten and abandoned as primitive and inefficient. And then we discovered the terrible truth. Images appeared in the air around them, showing civilizations spanning the galaxy, all speaking the same perfect language. And then gradually everything began to stagnate. Innovation slowed to nothing. Creativity died. Entire species lost the ability to conceive of new ideas because their language no longer gave them the frameworks to think in new ways. Without linguistic diversity, there can be no diversity of thought. We had created a prison of perfect understanding. By the time we realized our error, it was too late. We tried to resurrect the old languages, but they were too far gone. The last speakers had died. The cultural context had vanished. The hologram looked directly at Matthew with eyes that held millions of years of regret. We fell because we killed the very diversity that had allowed us to rise. This archive is our penance and our hope. We encoded our entire civilization into these walls with trillions of minds uploaded into a linguistic matrix. We exist as language now, and we have been waiting for someone who understands what we lost. But why contact us now? Carlos asked. Humanity is young. We have only been traveling in space for a few centuries, because you are the only species we have observed that actively resurrects dead languages. You understand instinctively what we learned too late, that every lost language is a tragedy, and every resurrection is a miracle. You are the last speakers of Earth's dead tongues, and you extend that same courtesy to the dead of other worlds. The hologram extended a hand toward Matthew. We offer you the archive. Take the linguistic records of 10 million years. Study them. Preserve them. Teach other species their value. Ensure that our mistake is never repeated. Matthew felt the enormous weight of the offer. The knowledge in the archive could change everything they knew about linguistics and anthropology and biology and even physics, since some forerunner languages encoded physical laws in their grammar. But it came with responsibility. There is a catch, Matthew said quietly. There is always a catch. The archive cannot be moved. Its structure is woven into the fabric of space and time here. To access it, species must come here into the heart of the nebula, making themselves vulnerable. They must prove they value knowledge enough to risk danger to obtain it. And there is one more condition. The hologram's features solidified into a face that was both ancient and ageless. The archive requires a keeper, someone to live here and guide visitors and ensure the knowledge is used wisely. The position is voluntary but permanent. The keeper becomes part of the archive, and their consciousness merges with ours, and their understanding of language becomes absolute. You want one of us to stay, Helen said quietly. We ask. We do not demand. But without a keeper, the archive will seal itself again for another million years. The team looked at each other, and Matthew saw the same question in all their faces. Then Kixthor stepped forward with his eye stalks radiating calm certainty. I will be the keeper. The discovery of the Forerunner archive should have brought a golden age of understanding to the galaxy. Instead, it triggered a crisis that threatened to tear everything apart. The problem started small and subtle. About 3 months after the archive's discovery, became public knowledge across all worlds. Ships began reporting communication failures, but not the technical kind. Crews who had spoken Galactic Standard perfectly for decades suddenly found themselves misunderstanding each other. Words changed meaning in the middle of conversations. Grammar structures that had been stable for centuries became confusing and ambiguous overnight. The linguistic drift, as people started calling it, spread like a disease through the communication networks. Species that had given up their native languages generations ago found their young members spontaneously creating new dialects. Translation software, which was the backbone of all interstellar commerce and diplomacy, started producing complete nonsense. Matthew was in a heated committee meeting on Unity Station when the first violence broke out. A trade dispute between the Krill Confederacy and the Zephyrim Collective got out of control because neither side could clearly understand what the other side's treaty terms actually meant anymore. What should have been a simple negotiation ended with weapons fired and 3 diplomats dead. This is complete madness, Helen said as they reviewed incident reports from across the galaxy. Languages do not just destabilize like this. Evolution takes generations, not months. Kevin Park, the computational linguist, had spent 72 hours straight analyzing the patterns, and his face looked exhausted, but his eyes were still sharp. It is not natural evolution. It is correction. The exposure to the archive triggered something in galactic consciousness. Species are subconsciously trying to return to linguistic diversity. You are saying the archive caused this. Matthew could not believe what he was hearing. Not caused exactly. More like catalyzed. Think about it carefully. For thousands of years, the galaxy has been moving toward linguistic uniformity. Galactic Standard became dominant because it was convenient. Smaller languages died out and nobody cared. The archive showed us the cost of that uniformity, and somehow on a level deeper than conscious thought species are fighting back against it. Carlos burst into the room with his tablet glowing with urgent messages. We have a bigger problem now. The Velkari descendants are claiming linguistic ownership of the reconstruction you created. They are demanding that only they be allowed to speak it. 3 other species with Velkari loanwords are contesting the claim. It is going to the Galactic Court. That is insane. Helen protested loudly. Language cannot be owned by anyone. On Earth, maybe not, Matthew said quietly. But we are dealing with species that view cultural artifacts very differently. For some, language is sacred. For others, it is property. And we just dumped 10 million years of linguistic heritage into a galaxy that has no framework for processing any of it. The situation got worse very quickly. The Concordat called an emergency session and representatives from every major species came to Unity Station. But the meeting turned into chaos, as interpretation services failed over and over again. Accusations that should have been simple disagreements became deadly insults because of mistranslation. It was Tikrex, the Jeline linguist, who had gone with them to the archive, who made the critical observation. The problem is not the languages themselves. It is that we have forgotten how to be multilingual. For generations, we have relied on translation technology. We have lost the skill of actually learning other languages and thinking in multiple linguistic frameworks at the same time. Matthew felt the solution form clearly in his mind. We need to rebuild linguistic diversity, but we need to do it the right way this time. Not by forcing species back to their old languages, but by teaching everyone to be genuinely multilingual. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. He called an emergency session at the academy, and students and faculty from 32 species gathered as Matthew explained his plan. The Polyglot Initiative. Every species would teach their native language to at least one member of every other species. Not through translation software, but through immersion and cultural exchange and genuine learning. The Forerunners failed because they wanted unity through uniformity. Matthew explained to the assembled crowd. They wanted one language to rule everything, but true unity comes from understanding difference. We need people who can think in multiple languages and carry multiple cultural frameworks in their heads at the same time. The initiative faced immediate opposition from many sides. The Catherine Collective argued it was too inefficient. The Excelar Imperium claimed their complex pheromone-based language could not be learned by non-excelar biology. The Krill Confederacy insisted their language was too sacred to share with outsiders, but a surprising ally appeared to support them. From the Veil, Nebula Kixthor's voice echoed across the communication networks amplified by the archive itself. I have absorbed 10 million years of linguistic knowledge. I have seen languages that could only be spoken by beings of pure energy. I have seen grammars that existed in 12 dimensions. I have seen scripts that encoded quantum superpositions. If they could learn to communicate across such barriers, then so can you. The keeper of the archive shared fragments of Forerunner knowledge just enough to prove the concept worked. He showed how species that were completely different from each other had once learned mutual languages and created hybrid forms that bridged seemingly impossible gaps. Slowly and reluctantly, the galaxy agreed to try the new approach. The Academy became the center of a massive undertaking, unlike anything seen before. Human linguists spread out across known space, teaching not just languages, but the mental skills needed to juggle multiple linguistic frameworks. They taught species how to switch between language codes and how to maintain separate sound systems and how to think in the grammar of one language while speaking another. Matthew personally took on the hardest case, which was the Excelar Imperium. He traveled to their humid homeworld and spent 6 months learning their pheromone language and became the first non-Excelar to speak it fluently. The breakthrough came when he realized their pheromones were not just scent markers but three-dimensional emotional sculptures. Each word carried not just meaning but the speaker's full emotional context. Your language does not translate to linear speech, he told the Empress through clouds of carefully controlled scent. But it can be described and taught and appreciated. Let me show other species what they are missing. Let them understand the beauty of communication that uses not just ears but entire sensory systems. The Empress was fascinated by this strange mammal who could taste her words, and she agreed to the plan. Within 1 year, the Academy had developed a full-day curriculum that taught non-sailor to understand axillary pheromones through technological augmentation and intensive training. Similar breakthroughs followed across the galaxy in rapid succession. The Catherine's quantum-entangled language, once thought impossible for normal minds to understand, became teachable through meditation techniques borrowed from human Zen Buddhism. The crystalline Charzen's harmonic speech was mastered by species without their resonant body, cavities through surgical implants, and years of dedicated practice. But the real transformation came from the children who grew up in this new world. Young beings raised in the Polyglot Initiative grew up speaking 3 or 4 or 5 languages fluently from birth. They did not see linguistic difference as a barrier, but as a gift to be celebrated. They created new hybrid languages that borrowed from many sources, just like Swahili had done on Earth. A human child named Sophie Martinez became famous across the galaxy for inventing Stellar Common, which was a mix of Galactic Standard and Thalnoon. Angeline in human English. It spread through schools on 100 worlds not because anyone forced it, but because it was fun and flexible, and perfectly suited for children of multiple species to play together. 5 years after the crisis began, Matthew stood before the Galactic Council once more. The communication problems had mostly resolved themselves. Not because everyone spoke the same language again, but because everyone could speak multiple languages. The galaxy had become genuinely multilingual for the first time in its recorded history. The Forerunners warned us about the danger of linguistic uniformity, Matthew said to the assembled representatives, but they did not tell us the solution because they never found it themselves. We have found it now. The answer is not one language or many separate languages. It is all languages learned and celebrated and kept alive by people who understand that each one is precious and irreplaceable. Kolvax, the Velshire elder who had first brought them to the archive, stepped forward with her wings spread wide. Dr. Burke, the Council recognizes that humanity's contribution to galactic civilization has been profound beyond measure. Your species has taught us to value what we had forgotten existed. In recognition, we propose establishing a permanent human seat on the Linguistic Preservation Council. It was an honor never given to such a young species before, but Matthew understood it was really a responsibility that would last forever. Humanity would be the galaxy's memory keepers, ensuring that never again would a language die unnoticed and unmourned. 10 years after the discovery of the Forerunner archive, Matthew Burke was no longer a young man. Gray streaked through his hair, and the long years of traveling between worlds had left him with a permanent limp from an injury that never quite healed right. But his eyes still held the same fierce curiosity that had driven him to resurrect dead languages when everyone else said it was impossible. He stood in the Academy's central hall, surrounded by students from 47 different species. The Academy had grown beyond anything he had imagined in those early days. 5 campuses across the galaxy and thousands of graduates working to preserve and resurrect extinct languages, and a linguistic database that was larger than anything that had existed before. But now he had been summoned to a place he never expected to return to. Earth. The message came from the Sol System Preservation Society, which was a group dedicated to maintaining historical sites from humanity's time before. They traveled to the stars. They had found something in the ruins of an old research facility in Antarctica, sealed beneath 2 kilometers of solid ice, something that came from before humans ever left their home world. Helen insisted on coming with him, even though she was older now, with gray hair and lines on her face from a lifetime spent staring at ancient texts. "One last adventure," she said with a smile, "for old time's sake." They arrived at the dig site on a bitter winter day with wind howling across the frozen landscape. The ice had been carefully removed, revealing a bunker that dated back to the late 20th century. The Cold War era, when humanity had nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. Dr. Amanda Cole, the lead archaeologist, met them at the entrance bundled in thermal gear. We have dated it to 1987. It appears to be a time capsule project that was classified by the government and then completely forgotten. The technology is very primitive, but we managed to get power to it. Dr. Burke, you need to see what is inside. The bunker's interior was like stepping into a museum from another age. Analog computers and magnetic tape drives and everything covered in decades of undisturbed dust. But in the center of the main room stood a device that made Matthew stop breathing for a moment. It was a golden disc mounted on a mechanical player. Engraved on its surface were diagrams showing how to play it along with mathematical formulas and simple pictures. It looked almost exactly like the Voyager golden records that had been sent into space on the Voyager probes. But this is different, Amanda explained as they examined it carefully. The Voyager records were launched into space. This one was buried in ice. Why would they do that? Helen studied the engravings with her practiced eyes. This is not meant for aliens. Look at the notation carefully. This is a message to future humans, to us. They played the disc and the first sounds were greetings in dozens of Earth languages just like the Voyager record. But then came something completely new. A message in English spoken by a man whose voice sounded weary and afraid. If you are hearing this, then humanity survived. Thank God for that. We did not know if you would make it. In 1987, we came within hours of nuclear war. Closer than most people ever knew about. When the crisis passed, some of us realized how fragile everything really was, how easily all of this could vanish in fire. Our languages and our cultures and our entire species gone forever. Matthew and Helen looked at each other with understanding. This was before first contact and before humans knew there was anyone else out there in the universe. The voice on the recording continued. We created the Voyager records to show aliens who we were if they ever found them. This record is different. This is for you, our descendants. We buried it deep in ice because we wanted you to find it only if you survived. Only if you advanced enough to reach even the harshest parts of our world and bring this back. We gathered every language we could record. Not just the major ones spoken by millions, but the endangered ones. The ones spoken by only a few dozen elderly people. Languages that were dying even as we recorded them. We documented grammar and vocabulary and cultural context. Everything we could preserve before it was gone. The disc contained audio recordings in over 3,000 languages, and many of them had gone completely extinct in the centuries since. Languages that not even the Academy's vast databases had managed to preserve. There were also digital files stored on ancient hard drives carefully sealed against decay. Dictionaries and grammatical analyses and video recordings of last speakers and even children's stories and songs. We did not do this for science. The voice said with emotion thick in every word. We did it because we were terrified. Terrified that we would destroy ourselves and take all of this beauty with us. Every language is a unique way of understanding the universe. Everyone that dies takes knowledge with it and perspectives that can never be recovered or recreated. Matthew felt tears running down his face. These people who were his ancient ancestors had understood something that even the advanced forerunners had forgotten. They had known instinctively the true value of linguistic diversity. If you are hearing this, you survived the 20th century. You made it past the nuclear age. You are probably wondering why we were so worried about languages when we faced extinction. I will tell you why. Because language is what makes us human. It is how we pass knowledge to our children. It is how we tell stories and dream dreams and imagine futures that do not exist yet. If we lose our languages, we lose ourselves. The recording shifted to a collection of voices speaking in languages that had been dead for generations. Ayak spoken by the very last native speaker. Ubik with its incredible number of consonant sounds. Bora with verb tenses that described whether you saw something yourself or heard about it from someone else. Dozens and dozens of others, and each one was a treasure beyond price. Helen was crying openly now. This is a gift from the past, from people who did not even know if there would be a future to receive it. The final message returned to English one last time. We leave this to you, whoever you are and whenever you are. Keep these languages safe. Study them and honor them. Let the people who spoke them be remembered. They were us. They were human, and as long as someone can speak their words, they still live in some small way. The recording ended with music. A piece called Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground by Blind Willie Johnson. A human voice, wordless but full of emotion, singing into the darkness and the void. Matthew stood in silence for a long moment, then activated his communicator. "Kixthor, can you hear me from here?" The Keeper's voice came through, resonant with the weight of the archive. "Always, my friend. What do you need from me? We found something important. A message from Earth's past, from before we knew we were not alone in the universe. Languages that were lost are now found again. Can you integrate them into the archive? Send me the data immediately." "But Matthew, you already know the archive does not need them just for preservation. You want something else?" Matthew smiled because his old friend understood him perfectly. "I want them taught. I want the Academy to offer courses in every language on this disk. Not because they are useful or practical, but because they are human. Because real people who lived and loved and feared and hoped spoke them, and they deserve to be remembered. Consider it done. But I sense this means more to you than academic interest. The people who made this recording thought they were saving these languages for other humans in the future. They never imagined we would be teaching them to Thal Noon and Jeline and Krill. They never dreamed their gift would spread beyond Earth to touch the stars." Helen placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "They would be so proud of what you did. They were trying to build a bridge to the future. You built bridges to every corner of the galaxy. Over the months that followed, the disk's contents were carefully analyzed and digitized and integrated into the Academy's curriculum. The 20th century humans who had feared nuclear destruction became heroes, celebrated by species they never knew existed. A woman named Marie Smith Jones, who was the last speaker of IAC, and who had worked tirelessly to preserve her language before her death, was honored by the Galactic Council. Her language became one of the most studied extinct tongues in the entire galaxy, not because it was useful, but because it was beautiful. Kevin Park made a remarkable discovery while analyzing all the grammatical structures. These extinct Earth languages share deep patterns with 43 alien languages. The way Boro distinguished between things you witnessed yourself and things you heard about mirrors. Velkari evidential markers perfectly. The way Ubik organized its consonants resembles Krill military communication codes. Language is not just a human phenomenon. It is something universal. Matthew's final lecture at the Academy took place on a warm spring day on Arkiva. Students from across the galaxy had gathered to hear the man who more than anyone else had championed, bringing dead languages back to life. "When I started this work," he began slowly, "I thought I was just solving puzzles. Ancient scripts and dead languages were mysteries to be figured out. But I learned something important along the way. Every language I helped resurrect was not just a code I cracked. It was real people being remembered. The Velkari love poets, the forerunners who understood their mistakes too late, the humans of Earth who recorded their languages in fear and desperate hope." He displayed an image of the Golden